All right, this chapter is dealing with mandated disclosures. Y'all, hopefully that makes sense just by the title. Y'all, obviously, there are certain things that you're required. Y'all, it's mandatory that you disclose. Now, keep in mind as we go through this section, a lot of states have different requirements here on what a mandated disclosure is. So we're just going to kind of touch on some of the general things, some generalities, if you will. And just know when we get into the state specific portion of your state, then we'll get into the little more details on exactly what those disclosures are. But again, what we're getting ready to talk about here, pretty much every state requires both the homeowner and the real estate agent. Okay, and that's key. And the real estate agent must disclose certain things that they have knowledge of. Now, obviously, if you have knowledge and it's like a material defect of some sort, then you have to disclose that. Well, what if the seller says, no, I don't want to disclose that because buyers won't buy the house? Well, first of all, they're required by law to disclose it. But even if they refuse to disclose it and you know it, then you have to disclose it. Y'all, it's the law, okay? So be careful that you don't let a client, in this case a seller, convince you to do something that's illegal. It can cost you your license and a lot of money, okay? So be careful here. So let's look at what some of these disclosures might include. Obviously, there are property condition disclosure forms in a lot of states. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But y'all, we're going to be talking about warranties, inspections that are highly recommended, and then what some of these material facts and or defects might be. Y'all, it's just kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about. But we start out with the home itself. Y'all, assuming you're selling a house, y'all, residential property. Y'all, the law says if you have knowledge of any problems, y'all, defects, material facts. Now, first of all, what's a material fact? Y'all, anything that could create a loss in value. It would create something that would be defective, doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Y'all, things like that. And maybe it could even, maybe you have knowledge that they're going to widen the road in front of the house. They haven't done it yet, it hadn't even started. There's no visible evidence that they're getting ready to do that. But you know they are. You got to, y'all, that's a material fact. You must disclose that, look, the state has plans to widen the road, which means they're going to be taking 20 feet, 30 feet, whatever the case may be, out of your front yard to widen the road. Y'all, if you try to hide that, that's going to cost you. But y'all, that's what we're talking about here. So material facts, anything that could affect the use of the property, the value of the property, and then obviously any material defects with the property. Y'all, you got to disclose this stuff. Now, some states actually require like a property condition disclosure statement. Y'all, it's just a written document that actually has a lot of questions, specific questions about the property, and you got to answer to it. Are there any problems? Do you know of any problems with this? Do you know any problems with that? And then you got to fill that out, and it's got to be signed by the seller and the buyer. Again, that's in some states. Every state does not require a written property disclosure. But even with the states that don't require written disclosure, typically, most, if not every state, has license laws that require you still must disclose it. So just because they're written a form to disclose it on does not exempt you from disclosing defects and material facts and things like that. Now, I will tell you also, and not that this really matters, I don't think, for test purposes, but in some, at least some of the states that I'm aware of, that they don't have a written property disclosure statement. that's required by law. A lot of these states, the Association of Realtors has developed a written disclosure statement that basically it's optional. Again, it's not required by law, but it is optional. And I got to tell you, I think that's a very good idea, especially for you as the real estate agent. It baffles me that we have states that have no written disclosure requirements. I'm just telling you, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen right there. So I would want it in writing. I want my seller to put something in writing telling me what they know or what they don't know. Because otherwise, I'm just telling you, you could have a legal issue on your hands. If a buyer buys that house, then discovers some major and maybe even very expensive problems with the house that was never disclosed, and if they can determine that seller knew about it or maybe even should have known about it, we're going to have problems here. So, for my liability and for my protection, I want that seller to fill something out. I want something in writing, whether it's required by law or not. Again, it's just insurance for me. I want to protect myself at all costs. Okay, moving on. So what are some of these defects we keep talking about? Things like windows and doors. Do they open and close properly? Are they sealed properly? Do they work like they're supposed to? Are any of them broken? Are there any structural issues? Now, obviously, that's a huge deal right there. If you got a structural problem, obviously there's a big difference between a structural issue and a cosmetic issue. If you got a hole in the wall, in the sheetrock, that's cosmetic. You can patch that, you can fix that. But if you got a structural problem and it's not addressed, the whole property could come caving down on top of you, right? If it's not structural. So, that's a big issue. Appliances, other systems within the home, like the heating and air, stuff like that. Especially heating and air, that could be a fairly major expense if we got to replace that. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. But I'm going to say it, but I'll go ahead and say it just in case you don't. But with a heating and air unit, there are things you can do to a heating and air unit to make it work for a few more days. You can kind of put some Band-Aids on, make it work for a few more days. But it's going to break, and it's got to be replaced. That kind of stuff has to be disclosed. You can't just try to fix it for a few days to get it past the buyer and not make them aware that this could be a major expense on the horizon for you. Any repairs that need to be made obviously need to be addressed. And quite frankly, I've always been one, any repairs that have already been made, I want to make the buyer aware of that too. Here are some issues that we had, but here are the repairs that we've done. Again, just full disclosure. I'd rather disclose too much than not enough. Unpermitted renovations. Now, I'm going to tell you, that's another biggie right there. You're required, I'm sure in most, if not every state, to have a permit when you're doing renovations. Now, obviously, it does depend on the renovation. What are you doing? I will tell you, not only could the answer to that question, in fact, what's the question? If I'm doing this, does that require a permit before I can do it? I will tell you the answer to that question not only will vary from state to state, it will vary from municipality to municipality. Just where I live, where I operate. If I go to the building office and request a permit to put a deck in the yard, on the back of my house, just use that for example. I want to put a deck on the back of my house. Well, where I live, you better have a permit for that deck. You got to have it. But I can go just 2 or 3 miles down the road. It's a little bit different. It is a different municipality where I live. And you go to that building department and they say, well, you probably don't need a permit. Well, what does that mean? You probably don't. They might have, well, if the deck's more than 3 feet off the ground, then you must have a permit. But if it's no higher than 3 feet, then you don't need a permit. So y'all, there are different requirements for different areas. And what I highly suggest or recommend, y'all, you better not guess and assume. I know a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and if I need to, I'll ask for forgiveness later. This is going to be a very expensive forgiveness for you, y'all, if it's something that required a permit and you didn't get one. And when I say you, obviously it's on the homeowner to do that. But y'all, just make sure things are permitted. Homeowners are supposed to have a permit to do renovations, okay? Renovating the kitchen, renovating the bathroom, especially if you're going to be taking out walls, like a lot of people like to do nowadays. Y'all, typically that's going to require a permit. But what does that have to do with us if we're the real estate agent? That's on the homeowner. If they didn't get a permit, there's nothing I can do about that. Well, here's what it has to do with you and I. If you know, again, you have knowledge that they've added this deck, they built a new deck, maybe they replaced an old deck, y'all, whatever the case may be, and it requires a permit, but the seller didn't get one. And I'm telling you, that is extremely common. Then you must disclose, make sure buyers know, look, we got a very nice deck back here. But I got to tell you, there was no permit for the deck. Y'all, you better disclose that. And then if the buyer goes on and says, it looks fine to me, it feels safe, I'm okay with it. Then that's on the buyer. Then if anything happens after they buy that property, y'all, that's on them, because you told them that it was unpermitted. There was no permit for it. And now, obviously, if you didn't put that in writing and have them sign off acknowledging that you told them that, I think you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a he said, she said situation, and 99.99% of the time, as the agent, you're going to lose that fight. You can claim, but I told them. But if they didn't acknowledge it, then you didn't tell them. So, y'all, that could be a problem, and we don't want to go down those roads. But y'all, the main thing I want you to note right here, y'all, most renovations require a permit. If the seller did not get a permit before they did the renovations, you better make sure you disclose that to the buyer. That this kitchen was renovated, there were no permits. Bathroom was renovated, there were no permits. We took this wall out between the dining room and the kitchen. There were no permits. Y'all, whatever the case may be, y'all, you better disclose there were no permits. Now, let me say this too. And you better be careful with this, because, y'all, I know in my market, y'all, a lot of real estate agents that kind of operate under this philosophy. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know about it. Because if I don't know about it, I don't have to disclose it. You can't require me to disclose something I didn't know, right? So just I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Y'all, that's going to get you in trouble. In fact, not only should you insist on them telling you what they know, y'all, you have an obligation to ask questions. Y'all, let me give you a quick example of what I'm talking about here, y'all. And this is something that I encountered not too long ago, maybe a year ago. But y'all, I was invited by the homeowner to come. Y'all, he wanted me to list and sell his house, which obviously I'm always grateful for that. But as I was doing the walkthrough, y'all, the seller was taking me around, showing me the house, and then we walked out into the garage. And, y'all, as we walked into the garage, y'all, obviously it's got a concrete floor. But, y'all, I could tell, y'all, pretty almost right in the center of the garage, y'all, a fairly large section of concrete had been replaced. Y'all, you could just tell there was like a newer section of concrete right in the middle of the rest of the garage. Y'all, you could see it. You could tell it. And I will tell you, most agents are not even going to pay attention to stuff like that. They might notice it, but maybe they don't want to know anything about it either. So they don't ask any questions. Y'all, I'm telling you, you better start asking some questions. Y'all, when you see stuff like that, you can't just act like you didn't see it. So anyway, I asked the homeowner, I said, well, what happened? What was going on here? And he told me that at the time, they thought there was a water line that ran underneath that garage, which I thought was kind of strange in itself, but whatever. But he said it was a water line that ran underneath the garage, and they thought it might be leaking. And the only way to check it, make sure everything was okay, was have to cut a hole through the concrete to get to the water line or the pipe. And according to the seller, there were no issues. It was not leaking. So obviously they covered it, filled it in, and so you see that newer looking patch there. I said, okay, well, and I hate that I have to be this way, but I just feel like I have to be this day and time for whatever reason. But I know this is going to sound bad, and I hate to even say it, but it's the truth. But I almost to the point now where I just assume somebody's lying to me until I can verify they're telling me the truth. I hate to have to be that way, but that's just the way it is, it seems like. I don't know why lying has gotten to be such a major problem throughout humanity, I guess. But I can't stand lying. I can't stand it. But anyway, I won't get off on that. By the way, Jesus got a problem with it too, so I have a problem with it as well. But anyway, so I just asked him kind of nonchalantly. I said, well, thank goodness for you, there were no issues. I'm just curious, who does this? And he said, well, the company that did this, and he told me the company. I said, okay, well, very good. Well, again, my motto now, the way I operate is in God we trust, all else we verify. Again, I'm just going to assume what you're telling me is not true or not the full truth until I can verify that what you're telling me is truthful. And when I got back to the office, I called that company that he told me did the work on that house, in that garage. And they did, and they told me, and I said, so everything is good to go. There were no issues. They said, well, we don't know that. I can tell you, they said when we were out there was a water line that was leaking, and to make the repair, they were going to have to basically tear out the whole garage. They're going to have to tear out a lot more than what they had there to make that repair, which I guess was going to be somewhat expensive. And the homeowner told them, I can't do that. Just cover it back up and patch it as good as you can. And so now I know this is why they're wanting to sell that house. He just outright lied to me about what was going on here. And see, what would have happened, if I'd have just listed that house and I never asked any questions, if there's a water line leaking under there, do you think that at some point, whoever buys that property is going to know about it? They're going to find out about it. You bet they are. And they're going to know that the sellers knew about it because, there was a patch. There was evidence. You knew this was a problem and you didn't disclose it. So obviously, chances are that seller's going to get sued. And this is going to really be expensive, most likely. But guess what? If they sue the seller, guess who else is going to get named in the lawsuit? The listing agent. Well, why didn't you disclose it? The law requires you to disclose it as well. And you can sit and say, but I didn't know it. I had no idea that there was a water line even under there, much less one that was leaking. Well, why didn't you know? Couldn't you see that patch right there? Y'all, I'm just telling you, y'all, in full disclosure, I've been teaching real estate law and stuff for a long time, at least here in South Carolina. And because of that, y'all, when there is a lawsuit that breaks out among real estate agents, or if real estate agents are involved, y'all, I tend to get called on to testify as an expert witness, sometimes for, sometimes against agents. But y'all, my point is, y'all, I see what happens in the courtroom. And I'm not trying to scare you right now. Y'all, that is not my intentions. And y'all, there's no reason for you to get scared. Oh, well, I'm going to get sued. No, you won't. Well, I can't say no, you won't. You never know what somebody will do. But you can't live your life worried about getting sued. But you can live your life trying to do the right thing. And my point is, y'all, in a courtroom, the questions you're going to get on that stand is, well, how could you not know? Did you not see where there was a patch in that concrete where something's been repaired or attempted to be repaired? Why didn't you ask? Y'all, my point is, y'all, you do have an obligation to ask questions when you see what we might refer to as a potential red flag. So, y'all, if you see a red flag, or that it could be a red flag, y'all, you got to ask questions. You can't just play stupid. I'm telling you, that is not going to work for you, especially if you wind up in that courtroom in front of a jury. It is not going to go well for you. Y'all, things like, when the seller says, well, we just put this new sunroom on the back of the house. It's awesome. We love it. Ugh, that's awesome. Yep, it's really nice. Well, y'all, that was something that was added to the house. That was an addition. Based on what we just talked about, what should be the first question out of your mouth to that seller? Seller, this is awesome. It is really nice. Did you get a permit to put it here? Y'all, if they say no, then you better make sure you disclose that. Got a nice looking sunroom here, but there's no permit. You better disclose it. Look, you got to be able to ask questions. Y'all, you got to pay attention to potential red flags. Y'all, ask the question. Okay? Now, look, I'm not an attorney, not trying to play an attorney. Now, if your attorney says don't ask questions, then I suggest you go with whatever your attorney says, because they're the one going to have to defend you, not me. But I'm just telling you, based on just from my experience, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form giving legal advice. But I know what the law says, certainly in South Carolina, but y'all, like I say, in most states, y'all, you're required to disclose things you know about. And it does seem like, at least in a lot of states, y'all, somebody that might be suing you for not disclosing something, y'all, they may not have to prove what you knew. They may only have to prove what you should have known. If you had been doing your job, if you had asked the right questions that you should have been asking, then you would have known. But because you were not being diligent, which we know diligence is a fiduciary duty. That's an obligation you're required to fulfill. If you're being diligent, then you should have been asking questions about whatever that is, right? So anyway, y'all, just make sure you disclose stuff. And again, whether your state requires it to be on a legal written disclosure form or not, yeah, I would get it in writing, whether it's required by law to be in writing or not. I would, because I don't know how you're going to defend yourself if it's just a verbal communication. I don't know. Y'all, some other things that you would have to disclose, again, if you have knowledge of pests, termites, stuff like that, mold. This is another area you probably need to be very careful, okay? Most of us real estate agents are not mold experts. Apparently, there are different types of mold. Some mold is considered toxic, which is where the health issues come in. but some of it apparently is not toxic. Again, I'm not a mold expert. My guess is you aren't either. Be careful about using the word mold. That's all I'm going to, I'll just say that. Because y'all, when you say there's mold in the house, y'all, it may not be a toxic mold. And y'all, now the seller may have issues with you because you've stigmatized their property. You've allowed buyers to believe there's some serious problems in the house, and it may be, but it might not be. So I will tell you, in fact, a lot of home inspectors, at least in our market, typically when a home inspector sees stuff that could be mold, rarely, if ever, do you see a home inspector use the word mold. They use the word there is a fungus underneath the house, or whatever. They kind of stay away from using the term mold. But the point they're trying to make is there is a fungus down there, and basically the inspector's saying, I don't know if it's toxic, I don't know if it's an issue or not, but you might want to get a mold expert or remediation team or whoever to come and take a look at it. In fact, I promise you they will put that in there. We recommend you have a mold expert come in and take a look at this fungus. They don't use the word mold typically. And I suggest you be careful using it yourself. All right. Environmental hazards. Again, if you know of any environmental hazards, they exist, and you got to disclose that stuff. Some of it we've already talked about in a previous chapter, right? Mold being one, asbestos being one, lead paint. We've talked about some of this stuff already. But again, if you have knowledge of any of these issues, they have to be disclosed. These are mandatory. That's what mandated disclosures means. Okay. And here we look at some of the steps to take if the disclosure reveals something concerning. Obviously, if you're the buyer, the seller provides information, or I say if you're the buyer or the buyer's agent. Some steps to take. Well, one, you want to clarify any questions with the seller. If they're saying that there was an issue, such and such of an issue existed with the property. Okay, well, have you remedied that problem? Has it been fixed? Has it been repaired? Who did it? When did they do it? That kind of stuff. You need to clarify information to make sure you know what the status of that situation is right now, today. Okay? Don't just freak out every time you see the seller. Let me say it this way. If you own a house, you will be required to maintain the house. Okay? Things are going to break. In fact, if you're working with a buyer, and especially if it's a young or a new home buyer, never owned a home before, I'm telling you, a lot of first-time home buyers, they don't understand what I'm trying to say right now, but I want them to know that you probably wouldn't be a bad idea to every month put some money aside in a savings or whatever for repairs because things break. Water lines break. Heating and air breaks. The roof will start leaking. At some point you have to do and provide maintenance on the house all throughout the time you own the property. And so, maybe the seller indicated that the roof was leaking. Okay, well, you say it was. Well, what does that mean? Has it been repaired? Did you replace the roof? Give me the details here. And if it's me, if I'm the buyer's agent, I want to know who did that work. And then I'm going to talk to them about it. I want to call them, kind of like I was saying with this other house I almost listed. Obviously, I didn't list that house, by the way. But we got to look into stuff like that. Again, this is if you're the buyer's agent. You need to verify stuff for your buyer. Help them out a little bit. In some cases, we can renegotiate the sales price. if I have a contractor that says, and this is kind of common, quite frankly, where say the roof is not leaking at all. There's no evidence that this roof is leaking. But the contractor, given their experience, says, no, it's not leaking now, but it will be soon. This roof is in bad shape and it needs to be replaced. It will be leaking soon. Well, what does soon mean? Is that next week? Is that a year from now? 3 years from now? Nobody knows. Even the contractor cannot answer that question. But they can look and say, look, these shingles are peeling up. They're just not in good condition. So you're going to need a new roof. So in a lot of cases like that, if we get an estimate, and just for example, the contractor estimates $15,000 to replace the roof. Well, then if my buyer's really interested in the house, they really want it, then they might renegotiate the sales price. Well, look, I'll still buy the house, but not at the price I've agreed to pay it, because I didn't know about this $15,000 roof replacement that was going to be needed soon. So instead of that $250,000, I'll give you $235,000. We'll renegotiate the price. Now again, the seller's going to have a part in this too. They could either agree to it or not agree to it. But at the end of the day, if the expense, if it's going to cost too much to make the repairs that maybe the inspector noted, then the buyer could potentially just back out. Again, by law, typically in a contract to sale, and maybe I should address this just real quick. In the contract to sale, most contracts, if not every contract sale I've ever seen, will have what they call a due diligence period, which gives the buyer X number of days. I will tell you, in our market, it's a common number of days to say 10 business days. 10 business days is 2 weeks, is what we're dealing with here. So from the time the house goes under contract, now the buyer in the next 2 week period can basically have any type of inspection done they would like. And I'm telling you, highly recommend you have these a home inspection, termite inspection, heating and air inspection. If there's a pool, you might want a pool inspection. There could be any number of inspections depending on the type of property you're buying. But you need to get it inspected. Well, wait a minute. And I hear this a lot too. But Frankie, didn't you tell me that if there's anything wrong with the property, the seller's required by law to disclose it? Yes, I did. But the seller's only required to disclose what they know. On things that they know is a problem. Could there be issues with a house and the seller not even know about it at the time they're trying to sell? You bet. I'm telling you there are. And if you have any doubts, here's what you need to do. Call a home inspector today and ask them to come and inspect the house you live in right now, the house you currently own. I promise you, by the time that home inspector leaves, you're going to have about 20 to 30, maybe even 40 pages of problems with the house that you did not know about. You had no idea. Now, hopefully none of them are major problems. But I'm telling you, there are issues that we don't always know about. This is why, as a buyer, you want to get the house inspected. And I'm telling you, if I got a buyer and they refuse to have inspections done, you will be signing something acknowledging, well, I recommended you get inspections on this, and this, and you refuse to do it. That's up to you. Again, you're not required to have the inspection, but that can come back and bite you in a number of ways if you refuse to do the inspection. I'm just telling you. Probably not a good idea. But my point is this, going back to what I'm trying to get across here. The buyer has, say, 2 weeks or whatever amount of time it states in the contract to do your due diligence. Home inspector writes up all these issues. Well, then buyer, you and your agent are going to have to go through and look for things that you might consider to be a deal killer, if you will. Y'all, look, you better let your buyer know the seller's going to, the home inspector is going to be writing stuff up. But a lot of times it's just really nitpicking stuff. $10, done, is fixed. That kind of stuff, and even quite frankly, cosmetic stuff, is not something that I get concerned about. It's problems with the systems in the house, problems with structure, foundation, major things. That's what I'm concerned about. Things that are going to be very expensive to deal with, correct, or repair. That's the kind of stuff I think we need to pay attention to as the buyer's agent. I wouldn't worry a whole lot about the cosmetic stuff. That's just me. But I know there are some buyers, they'll send in a copy of that inspection to the seller and say, we want every single thing on this report to be fixed. Well, look, they might fix it. The seller might decide to go ahead and fix it, but y'all just understand they don't have to. And if they say we're not going to fix it, then maybe another option goes back to, well, can we renegotiate the sales price we've already agreed to? Can we take some off the sales price? Basically, we'll buy it the way it is, but just reduce the sales price. Certainly anything the buyer and seller agree to, you can do. But I will say this, and this is what that third bullet is saying here. If the seller says no to any repair that the buyer asks for, then the buyer can back out. Certainly in most states. Again, I'm not familiar with every contract across the country. In fact, I'm barely familiar with what's just in South Carolina. But again, in your state, we'll be going over contracts and we'll get into some of the specifics there, as it pertains to each state. But I tell you, in most states, if the seller refuses to fix something, then the buyer could decide, then I'm just not buying, and just terminate the contract, and typically without penalty. Now, I will tell you, some contracts, and I have seen this, where they require you to put some, not just earnest money, but basically money saying if you decide to back out for any reason, this money is going to the seller. You could lose that money if you back out for any reason. I don't like those provisions. In fact, if I'm working with the buyer, I'm going to do everything I can to get that provision out of my agreement. But anyway, we're not going to get into the weeds right now. And then obviously, if we find major issues, again, things that were undisclosed, the buyer has a right to terminate the contract and walk away. Again, because you didn't disclose it, that's a problem. All right. Some other important considerations. Again, seller can only disclose what they know. I'm telling you right now, there could be some major problems, and the seller not even know about it. I'm just telling you that could be the case. Therefore, highly recommend you get a home inspection before you buy. Sellers cannot be liable for something they did not know. We talked about that. And again, you make sure you get the home inspection. So, we've really already talked about those things. But I'm telling you, as the agent, you better make sure you're advising your buyers well. There's nothing wrong with suggesting you need a home inspection. Now, you're not required to have one, but we might recommend it. And I will tell you, and again, I don't want to get into the weeds and details here, but I'll tell you another item that I highly recommend. In fact, I think buyers should always do that, quite frankly, again, in my market, you rarely have a buyer do at all, and that's have a survey. I'd want a new survey on any real estate I'm buying. There are a number of reasons I'm saying that, and I don't have time to get into it right now, and I'm not. But I'm telling you, a survey, that's a big deal. In fact, and quite frankly, Y'all, if I had to choose between doing a survey or a home inspection, y'all, maybe I can only afford to do one or the other. Yeah, I can't say this would be my answer every single time, but probably most of the time I would prefer to get the survey. Again, it's going to depend on the property and situation, I guess. But I guess what I'm saying, y'all, a survey is critical. It's not required by law. It's not, the bank's not going to require it. But I will tell you, y'all say the bank, if the bank's not going to require you to do it in order for them to loan you the money, typically anyway. But I've seen a lot of issues because buyers didn't have a survey. And I'm going to tell you, you got issues come up because of the survey, that's going to most likely be expensive. That's going to be a big problem. All right. The next thing we have to disclose are warranties, y'all, home warranties. And really two different types of warranties, y'all, just to be familiar with, and certainly for test purposes. But also, y'all, again, if you're representing the buyer, y'all make sure they know about the warranties or the option to get a warranty if they choose to do so. Well, if they're buying a new home, new construction, never been lived in before, straight from the builder, then you can get what they call a builder warranty, or a lot of times they call it a 210 warranty. The reason they call it 210 is because you're going to get 2 years coverage on any systems, air conditioner, stuff like that. If it goes out within 2 years, the warranty will cover it. But then you get 10 years coverage on the structure, the building structure itself. So they call that a 210 warranty. Again, 2 years covers any systems within the house or within the property, and 10 years on the structure itself. Now, if it's not a new home, so you're buying from a previous owner, then there are other warranties you can get. There are probably literally thousands of home warranty companies out there. And they all work a little bit different on what they cover, how much the warranty costs, and stuff like that. Some people say it's a good thing, it's a good deal. Some say it's not. And I'm not going to voice my opinion right now, but look, you have to at least let them know. You must disclose that you can purchase a home warranty. I assume most people are familiar with these warranties, but basically, assuming you have a home warranty, then you call, something breaks, you call the warranty company, and they usually charge like a flat fee, $40, $50, $60, something like that. It will vary from one company to another. And then a contractor will come out, make the repair, fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then the warranty company will pay the contractor the difference, or whatever it costs to repair that stuff. I'm going to tell you, some of these companies are better than others. I'll just say that. But make sure you disclose that they at least have the option to purchase a home warranty. All right. Again, some of this stuff we've already, in fact, all of it looks like we've already talked about. But obviously buyers need to have inspections done. Highly recommend you get them done. Agents must verify information. That's what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Do not ignore these potential red flags. If you see a potential red flag, you better start asking some questions about it. If you decide to play stupid and then your defense is, but I didn't know about it. I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've seen it in the courtroom too many times. That don't fly in front of the jury. I'm just telling you right now, they're not going to buy it. What do you mean you didn't know it? Well, why didn't you know it? Couldn't you see whatever, you should, because of that red flag, whatever that is, how could you not, why didn't you ask some questions? If you were doing your job, because your job is to represent your client and the interest of your client. And for you to not even ask questions about things that are staring you in the face, how can you declare or decide that this is not, I'm just not going to ask no questions and I'm going to play dumb? You're going to have a problem. And again, and a lot of times sellers will tell you, look, we got a brand new deck, got a brand new sunroom, got a brand new kitchen, it's been totally renovated. When they start telling you all that stuff, and they will, based on what we've already talked about, what should be the first question out of your mouth? Did you get a permit? And by the way, now obviously if they say no, then obviously, and you need to just go ahead and tell them, all right, well, seller, we're going to have to disclose that. That's a mandatory disclosure. We must disclose to the buyers that, all this work was done, but there was no permit when it was done. But what if they say, yes, there was a permit? Should you just believe them? Maybe, I guess, whatever your company policy is. And that's something you'll have to just talk about. Talk to your broker, whoever you're working for. But, I'm telling you, if it's me, I'm going to verify it. I've just learned, I just can't, because I've been told too many times by homeowners they got permits for stuff, and they did not. They never got a permit. So, the way I address it, I typically just ask them, any chance you still have a copy of the permit? Because at the end of the day, I want that in my file. So if I disclose that there was a permit, I want to know there was a permit. You have a duty to verify information. So I do. And if they tell me they don't have a copy of it, which is most of the time, then I'll say, well, then seller, if you're okay, and if hopefully you won't have a problem with this, but I can just run by the building department and ask for a copy of the permit. Are you okay with that? Obviously, if you're the seller and you never got a permit, do you really want me to go to the building department asking questions and raising flag with them? Probably not. And a lot of times I've had people tell me, well, you know what? I'm not sure if we got a permit or not, honestly. As soon as I tell them I'm going to the building department, because I'm going to the building department. I'm just trying to give them an opportunity that if you didn't get a building permit, you better come clean now, because it's going to be found out. If you're telling me you got a permit, we're good, assuming you got a permit. Because I'm telling you, that building department ain't going to be happy when they find out that you've done stuff that requires a permit and you didn't get one. That's going to be a fine. And there could be other issues involved as well. So, you got to verify this information, okay? And this is not just the listing agent. This is also the buyer's agent. Just because the listing agent decides not to do their job, because say this is a listing agent has decided to play dumb, act like they didn't know it. Buyer agent, you have a duty to represent your buyer. You're going to see the same potential red flags that the listing agent saw. You can't say, well, the listing agent should have disclosed it and they didn't. Okay, well, why didn't you disclose whatever? You got to ask these same questions. And your job is to represent your client. That's a fiduciary obligation to promote and protect their best interest. So I suggest that's what you do. You better promote and protect your client. Don't just rely always on what the seller and or the listing agent decides to disclose to you. Because I'm just telling you, a lot of times, even though they're required to disclose things, they choose to play dumb. Well, that's not going to help you or your buyer when bad things happen. So y'all, look, just disclose things. Y'all, what if you were the buyer? Wouldn't you want to know about this, that, or whatever the issue might be? Y'all, just disclose it. Then I think everybody's happy. You'll feel better. Hopefully you'll be able to sleep better at night. And y'all, then everything just works out better when we try to help each other. Okay?